listening to the Marketing Personalities Podcast, a podcast for growth-minded entrepreneurs that serves up valuable insight and interviews about aligning your marketing strategy with your personality type. Because here's the deal. You shouldn't have to feel fake and salesy in order to grow your business. And you no longer have to. Your marketing strategy can feel good to implement and it can work. You can attract the right clients and customers to your business and grow your profits, all while staying true to who you naturally are. So in the name of honest business growth, bring your unique talents, perspectives, and personality to the table. And join us on this week's podcast episode to discover marketing that feels good for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. I'm Brit Kolo, and I'm here today to break down the letters in your Myers-Briggs personality type. All those letters that you've got in your type, what the heck do all of those mean? This episode was really inspired by my friend Annie. She DM'd me on Instagram and said, hey, do you have an episode or a blog post that just breaks down what these letters mean? And I was like, no, I don't, but I definitely should. So here we are. This episode is really going to break those down, really go back to the foundations of the Myers-Briggs type indicator framework and get you to not only understand your own aspects of your personality type, those letters, but also understand the opposite letters that you don't have in your personality type so you can relate to people who do have those aspects in their type. So where we need to start is, especially if you're brand new to marketing personalities, hey, this might actually be the very first time you're hearing my voice in podcast form. So hi. Here at Marketing Personalities, we use the Myers-Briggs type indicator. You might have seen it online as MBTI, and I refer to it as Myers-Briggs oftentimes. And in the MBTI, that framework considers 5 different aspects within your personality, and then they combine those 5 aspects into your 5-letter type. So, for instance, INFJ-A. Now, I know we don't really talk a whole lot about that 5th letter. It's either an A or a T, but we will today. So if you're curious, what does that mean? I'm going to hit it, so don't worry. So Myers-Briggs uses these 5 aspects. I'm going to walk through all 5 aspects today in detail. So buckle up. There's a lot of info. You might even want to grab a pen and paper for this in case you're really into it. And I also recommend, if you want to know the really structured background and information here, yes, I have it on the Marketing Personalities blog. I also recommend that you go to 16personalities.com and read about their framework there and their theory. They go into great psychological detail that I'm not necessarily going to hit here in this podcast or on my blog. I'm going to keep it in language that you can totally understand and relate it back to marketing. But if you want to see the psychology aspect of all of this, 16personalities.com has so much info there. And just so we're super clear, I don't own 16personalities.com. I have no affiliation to them. They're just my favorite place on the internet to point you to if you want to learn more about specifically these 16 types, okay? So if you don't know your Myers-Briggs personality type yet, at this point, you've got to know this, right? But if you don't yet, I always encourage everyone to go to 16personalities.com and take the free assessment there. Again, no affiliation. I just really like their assessment and I really like the results that they give you. I think that they're so comprehensive and it's so easy to understand what they tell you about you. So cool. All right. So at this point, hopefully you know your own personality type. Now I'm going to go into these 5 aspects and break them down. Basically tell you what's going on here. So we'll start with the first one. Your first letter is either an I or an E. I stands for introverted. E stands for extroverted. So what this first letter indicates, this is an aspect of your personality that relates to your mind and how you interact with your surroundings. Okay, so here's what this means. Introverted individuals tend to be more sensitive to external stimuli. And because of their sensitivity to external stimuli, they tend to sustain their minds by being alone or with just a few people. On the flip side, extroverted individuals, they tend to be less sensitive to external stimuli. So in response to that, they sustain their minds by seeking out external stimuli. And then that takes them to places where there's more people around. So as I say that, you might be kind of scratching your head like, wait, what? That is not what I thought introverted and extroverted mean. Yeah. So there are a lot of misconceptions about this aspect. I'm sure you've heard of them and you've probably even believed a number of them before. So please remember that the actual difference between introversion and extroversion is all about how sensitive you are to external stimuli. So again, introverts are more sensitive, and so they seek surroundings with less stimuli, and extroverts are less sensitive, so they seek surroundings with more stimuli. What introversion and extroversion doesn't mean, what makes an introvert different from an extrovert is not whether you're socially awkward or socially adept. Nope, that's not at all what we're talking about here. Although there does tend to be a trend, when you're around more people, when you like to be around more people, you have more practice with it, and then you might become more socially adept. But that's not at the core of what this aspect is about. It also doesn't mean that you either dislike people or like people. That's not really at the core. It doesn't mean that you prefer to either not engage in conversation or engage in conversation and talk all the time. Again, not at the core here. And it also doesn't indicate, or you can't know if you're introverted or extroverted based on how quiet or loud you are. It has nothing to do with this. Not at all. Okay. So it comes down to how sensitive you are to that external stimuli. Now, a common question that I get and I see around the internet all the time is this concern about the fact that a lot of people feel that they're in the middle. They're in the middle between introverted and extroverted. And there's this modern trend of people who identify as ambiverts. This is like a new term. It is not part of the original MBTI language at all. This is a new term that someone has come up with to describe someone who really feels like they're in the middle. They have introverted tendencies, they have extroverted tendencies, and they don't really feel strongly that they're either one. And okay, what I have to say about that is, yes, okay, all aspects are on a spectrum. And yes, you can be somewhere in the middle with any of the 5 aspects, any of the 5 letters. Yeah, I really think, and I've done some research here, I think 16personalities.com has some really great info about this, and I've included it in the show notes if you want to read more. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we do fall on one side of these tracks most of the time. The tricky part is identifying which side we most naturally prefer, because there are so many misconceptions about the differences between introversion and extroversion. So if we're operating from those misconceptions and we're trying to figure out which one we are, we're not going to get a clear read. So now that you know the actual difference based on how sensitive we are to external stimuli, maybe you can get a clearer read on truly if you're an introvert or an extrovert. And also, a lot of times in different assessments to see if you're an introvert or an extrovert, the questions are kind of misleading. And I love this example. I pulled it from a specific article called On the Topic of Ambiversion, published by 16personalities.com. And they give this example, and I think it so hits this point home. These questions are misleading because you might, to figure out if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you might ask yourself whether you would rather go to a party or read a book. And so then you're assuming, like, if you answer go to a party, then you're an extrovert. And if you say read a book, you're an introvert. But you also might counter that and be like, well, it depends on the party and it depends on the book. And that's totally reasonable, right? Because even the most withdrawn introvert might choose to go to a party with like 2 to 3 close friends as opposed to reading a boring book, right? And on the flip side, even the most extroverted person and dedicated party goer might want to take some time off and check out this latest book that they keep hearing about. So does this mean that these two people are both ambiverts? Probably not. They still probably at most times are one or the other. There are just a lot of interesting situations that might lead us to think that we're in the middle. So be careful here. That's all I have to say about that. And as I was writing the show notes for this, I was thinking, I could probably do an entire episode about introversion and extroversion and how it relates to marketing, how it relates to business, and basically busting some myths about it. So I might do that. I probably will do that in the future. But for right now, if you, in any of these aspects, feel like you are truly in the middle, it's very difficult to identify for you which side of the track you're on, whether it's introvert versus extrovert or any of the other aspects. It can happen. It can. I've kind of bounced around and struggled through this myself with my own personality type. So I totally get it. And if you really feel like you're in the middle and you're not sure which marketing personality type you then identify with, I really recommend, as it relates to marketing personality types here at Marketing Personalities, I recommend that you blend your top 2 types to find the absolute best strategy for you. Okay, so let's just say, for example, you really do feel like you're right in the middle between I and E. And so that makes you, let's just say, you're very in the middle between INFJ and ENFJ. This is a really common example. I hear it from people all the time. So you really feel like INFJ, ENFJ, it's just, they both kind of feel right. So in that situation, I would get the information from marketingpersonalities.com for the INFJ and the ENFJ, compare and really pick and choose, okay, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Because at the end of the day, you guys, this isn't about labeling you. This isn't about putting you in a box. None of this is about that. What this is about is connecting you with your absolute best marketing strategy, one that allows you to show up in your business, in your marketing, feeling good. So regardless of your letters and regardless of your type, the label that you're putting on any of it, at the end of the day, let's just make sure you feel good when you're marketing, because the point here is you shouldn't have to feel fake and salesy when marketing your business. And when you show up feeling good, not fake and salesy, but when you show up feeling good, your audience feels good. That's the point. So all of this intel that I'm giving you in this episode and in all the other episodes, it's really helpful. It helps you become more self-aware. I truly believe that. And you have the individual agency to say, okay, this might be my type, and these things really feel good to me, and these things just don't, even if they feel really good to most other people in your type, right? Like that is your prerogative. Take it, run with it, go for it. Okay. Moving on to the second letter. Your second letter is either an N or an S. N stands for intuitive. S stands for observant. So whether you are intuitive or observant, this aspect of your personality type relates to your energy and how you view the world and then take in information from the world. So intuitive individuals tend to pay attention to internal information and cues, which, because they're not focused on the brass tacks of the situation, those external cues, they're often pretty imaginative, open-minded, curious about things, which leads to creativity. And intuitive people, because of all of those things, the imaginative, the open-minded, the creative, all of that, it kind of propels the intuitive into the future. They're not necessarily as concerned with the past or even the here and now. They're really energized by the thought and the possibility of the future. They just see so many possibilities and they're open-minded about it. The observant individual, they tend to pay attention to external information and cues, which leads them to being more pragmatic and grounded because they're more focused on the brass tacks. And so they're more realistic and they're paying attention more to what has happened in the past or what is actually happening here and now, not so interested in being open to major future possibilities like their counterparts, the intuitives. And you know what? When it comes to the word intuitive and observant, at least in my circles, the word intuitive comes up a lot. And I want to just be really careful. If you are aiming at tapping into your intuition more, like a lot of people in my circles tend to be, and you are an S, an observant, that doesn't mean that you can't tap into your intuition. That's not at all what it means. It might be a little less natural for you. You might have to do a little bit more work to get there. But again, these are spectrums. And all of these aspects, because they are spectrums, the more you become self-aware and the more you mature throughout life, the less these distinctions need to keep you boxed in, right? It's like this, as you become more self-aware and mature into each of these aspects of your personality, the more you're able to leverage them. And so you're never held back from being a more intuitive being if you are observant. And same thing goes for if you're more intuitive now. It doesn't mean that you can't ever be pragmatic or grounded. You totally can be. It's just that naturally and most preferably, you go toward one or the other. Okay, so moving on to the third letter. Your third letter is either a T or an F. T stands for thinking, F stands for feeling. So whether you are thinking or feeling, this aspect of your personality type relates to your nature and how you make decisions and deal with emotions, okay? So thinking individuals tend to make decisions based on numbers and cold hard facts, which therefore allows them to be objective, rational, logical, right? And because they prefer thinking over feeling most of the time, they tend to hide or maybe even stuff down their feelings because they're prioritizing efficiency. In their psyche, they believe efficiency is more important to them than social harmony, and therefore they're prioritizing the numbers and the cold hard facts above emotions. Now, on the other side, feeling individuals, they tend to make decisions based on their senses and their emotions, which helps them therefore be empathetic and caring, obviously. And by preferring feeling over thinking, they tend to be more emotionally expressive and they prioritize social harmony above efficiency. This is the one out of all the aspects for me personally that I feel torn between. I see both of these things happening in me all the time, and it's a constant kind of back and forth. So it's been an interesting thing to observe and identify with. And so for me, what I've come to, at least at this stage, you know, we're all maturing, we're all growing every day if we're trying it all. And so this might shift in the future, but I really feel like I'm a solid dominant ENFJ with sometimes I easily and naturally move into an ENTJ. And sometimes that shift is really healthy for me. It's really beneficial and it feels amazing. And then sometimes I shift into that thinking mind in a very unhealthy way. And so I'm constantly trying to just work with that funny little thing in my own personality type, learn more about it and see what else I can uncover from that dynamic and play with it a little bit more, you know? So that's a little peek into that letter for me. Now, the fourth letter, this fourth aspect is either a J or a P. J stands for judging and P stands for perceiving. So whether you are judging or perceiving, this aspect relates to your tactics and how you approach work and decision making. Okay. So judging individuals, here's how I like to explain this. Judging individuals tend to see more of a black and white picture when they look out at life. So because they see more black and white, they find it easier to make clear decisions and set clear boundaries. And with this, they prefer clarity and closure, and therefore organization and structured plans of action. On the other hand, perceiving individuals, they tend to see more of a gray picture. They don't often see black and white. They see more gray when they look out at life. And so because they're not as discerning between option A or option B, object A, object B, they keep their options open. They stay flexible and relaxed most of the time. And so they prefer scanning for opportunities and options. Sometimes a phrase that they might use is going with the flow. They tend to do that quite easier than a judging individual does. And they prefer to deal with situations as they arise rather than trying to think ahead and have contingency plans and plan B and plan C and plan X, So that's the difference between the J and the P. Now, this is tough, and I know I've talked about this before on the podcast. When people hear the word judging, sometimes their mind says judgmental, and that's not at all what this letter means, okay? That is not what this aspect is about. If you are a J or a judging individual, that doesn't mean that you're judgmental. Judging means being discerning and seeing clearly defined lines between, like I said before, object A, object B, option A, option B. It's more about discerning the lines and boundaries between things, that black and white versus the gray, and not being discerning between the two options or the two objects. Okay. All right. So those are the four main aspects of your personality type. Those are the four aspects that I derive your marketing personality type off of. And then we have this final letter. It's either an A or a T, and it's kind of set apart from the other four letters. If you've noticed this, if you took the 16personalities.com assessment to find your type, you saw that you had four letters and then a dash and then an A or a T. And so this aspect is an interesting one. It doesn't really operate like the others. This aspect really underpins all the other aspects about your personality type, and it relates to your identity and how confident you are about yourself and your abilities and your decisions. Okay, so A stands for assertive and T stands for turbulent. And again, this very much underpins how you approach all of your other letters and how you see all of the other letters within yourself. So assertive individuals tend to be self-assured and confident in who they are, what they stand for, how able they are, and what decisions they make. Okay, pretty self-assured people. Turbulent individuals tend to be self-conscious, and they tend to question who they are, what they stand for, how able they are, what decisions they make a lot more often. So this is an interesting one. Again, if you're interested in learning more about that final letter, I highly recommend going to 16personalities.com. I've linked it in the show notes, specifically over to an article that'll explain more about all of these aspects in more detail. And this is just an interesting one. It would be crazy for me to not only have 16 marketing personality types, but then times 2 by infusing the A and the T. That's 32, you guys. That would be extra complicated. And I don't think that we need to really get that granular. What you can do, though, is understand the difference between the A and the T, identify which one you are, and then kind of plug and play, see how you approach all the other aspects and see what that might say about your business, your work, your marketing strategy. What I see is that if you are an assertive individual, because you are self-assured and confident in the decisions that you make, assertive individuals tend to get their marketing personality type, their best marketing strategy, whether they work with someone else or they work on their own to create their strategy. Then, because they are confident in the decisions they make, they go ahead and put it into play. They don't really question after that too much about that strategy. And if they do question it, it's not like they're questioning themselves. It's external. They might question the external plan, but they're not questioning themselves and getting self-conscious about their own efforts. Okay. Again, still a spectrum. This doesn't mean you're always like this, but it just tends to be how you are. And then on the flip side, the turbulent individual, because they're more self-conscious and sensitive to stress, really, they might get their marketing personality type, their best marketing strategy. And because that questioning of their self is always happening, there's more doubt. There's more doubt infused in all of it. And so they'll question the strategy, they'll question themselves, they'll question if they're going to be okay enough to actually make this work, and they're just going to question it a lot more. Does that mean they're never self-assured, they're never confident in the plan? No. Again, spectrum here. It's all good, right? Okay, so those are the 5 aspects. I hope this was not only informative, but really interesting and cool for you to listen through. Again, you can read more about these aspects of your personality type by going to, yes, you can read everything that I gave you in the show notes. That's at marketingpersonalities.com. That's linked in the show notes. And you can go even more in depth into the psychology, lots more examples at 16personalities.com/articles/our theory. Again, that's all linked. You can go find it. You can go read it. If you're a nerd like me and you think this stuff is cool, you can go read it. If you don't want to go learn more about that, totally cool. You got what you need. That's what this podcast episode was all about. You got what you need. You can move on. If you have any questions regarding anything that we just covered in this episode, here's what I want you to do. I want you to DM me on Instagram at Marketing Personalities. Just DM me. Or if you're not super cool on Instagram, that's fine. That's okay. Send my team an email at support@marketingpersonalities.com. Okay? And thank you so much for listening. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Now it's time to connect your marketing strategy to your personality type. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to download your marketing personality type full report. Use the code MPP at checkout to get $10 off. And that's a super special code for podcast listeners as a way to say thank you for being here. In your full report, you'll learn about your personality type, how it relates to the work you do, what your best marketing strategy includes so you can start implementing it right away, what your worst marketing strategy includes so you can avoid it, and so much more. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to get your full report and use the code MPP at checkout to receive $10 off your purchase. And one more thing before you skip on to the next podcast. Would you please share this episode with your entrepreneur friends who also need to feel good about their marketing strategies? Take a quick screenshot of your podcast app right now and share it out via text, Facebook, or my favorite, Instagram. Remember to tag me at Marketing Personalities in the photo so I can be sure to send you a huge high five and thank you for sharing the love. This podcast is edited and produced by the Podcast Engineers. They're pretty great, and you can find them at podcastengineers.com. That's all for now. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch you back here next week on the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Love ya. Bye.